Here we go. Welcome back to Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them, the podcast where we dive into real stories, expert advice, and sometimes even a few horror stories to help you avoid costly mistakes and protect the people you love. I'm your host, Jon Braddock, the author of Click Here When I Die, and the founder of My Life and Wishes, the Legacy Vault, an online document and planning storage solution created to make things easier for those you love. My guest today is Nicole Harvey, and she brings something a little different and a whole lot of fun to the world of estate planning. Nicole's an author and attorney licensed to practice in Nevada and the federal courts. Since 2008, she practices in the area of estate planning, probate, and trust administration, as well as employment law, civil litigation, corporate general counsel, risk management, and regulatory compliance. She's worked for law firms, in-house legal departments, and of course in solo private practice. Nicole received her bachelor's degree, in economics from the University of Nevada, Reno, and her law degree from Arizona State University, the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law. Forks up, go Sun Devils.
That's right. Go Devils.
Nicole is a proud native Nevadan, raising the next generation of kind, smart, and funny people near the ancient shores of the Great Basin. And not only is she an attorney and a seasoned legal expert, she is the author of a brilliantly titled book, I Hope You Die Laughing. Welcome, Nicole. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. See, I have to start by saying I love the title of your book and I loved reading your book.
Thank you.
So people can see it. I hope you die laughing. And as you can tell, I've been through this a few times because I've got sticky notes because I just find so much helpful information in there.
Oh, I'm
But I
so
hope
glad.
you die. Yeah, I hope you die laughing. It's bold, it's funny, and let's be honest, it's exactly what I think most people need when facing the topic like estate planning.
Mhm.
So, what inspired you to approach the subject like this?
Oh my goodness. I think I learned at an early age that when we can laugh at something, it's just not so scary. And so I think that maybe that attitude or that approach has just been a part of me, in my life as I've developed as a person. And I brought that to the practice of law, really, meeting people to help them prepare their estate plans. As a young lawyer, I really wasn't attuned to the dynamics, like what brings people in, what are they concerned about. So it took some time in practice for me to notice things like it's always the wives who bring the husbands. It's rarely the husbands who bring the wives in, right?
That's a
Uh,
male thing. That's immortality and things like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even more so if he happens to be a police officer or a firefighter or a paramedic or somebody in a saving profession, for very good reason, those folks have to believe that they are immortal, that nothing's going to touch them. And, bless them for it because they're going to run towards the danger so I can run away from it, you know. And so, I mean, that's not always a uniquely gendered characteristic. Sometimes it can be a personality characteristic that people are very resistant to thinking about or contemplating a time without themselves, right? That
Right.
life could go on without them. That's a very hard thing to contemplate. Um, but I've always enjoyed dark humor. The first television show I can remember liking was MASH, which is, that's what the whole show's about, is people doing some really tough stuff, and laughing with each other to get through it. And so I mean, that's kind of instinctively, maybe that's how I've learned to approach this with folks. Everybody's different. Some people don't enjoy a sense of humor at the table, and that's okay. And for other people, it's just the only way we're going to get this done, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny. My kids will ask me, they'll say, Dad, all you do is talk about death all the time since you started your company, 10 years back. I mean, how do you do it? It's like, it's only death, lighten up. It's not like I'm going to be the first to go or the last to go, right?
Right. It is probably the most common thing, the thing that we all have in common. It's going to impact our lives to lose other people. But it's still such a hard thing to talk about, And it wasn't until I lost somebody close to me that in walking through grief, that I really came to appreciate that grief is weird and grief is different for everybody. And there's just something about us as humans. I think it's just really hard to understand. And, sometimes I think I never will, and that's okay. But what I do understand, like, I don't know what happens to me when I die, but I know what's going to happen to my stuff. And that's because I've prepared a plan, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, as I always say, we're born into the world naked and we're leaving the exact same way. So that
That's
means
right.
we're not taking any of it with us. So it becomes kind of important that we decide what we want to have happen with it
Right.
versus our families fighting over what's going to happen with it. But yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I think it's a message people really need right now because too often estate planning is seen as cold, clinical kind of process, right? And
Sure.
following COVID, when people started to think more about this, um, and then adding a touch of humor to it, but getting it done, I think is really important. And it reminds me that people that plan, they need to think of they're actually creating an empowering act, a loving act, and it doesn't have to be depressing.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those things too, like unless you're at that inevitable moment, you're going to constantly underestimate how important it is to you to have that done. I had this experience, it's probably 12 years ago now. I had a client, business client. We had never done any estate planning together or anything like that. She called me one late afternoon and she's just a mess. She's in tears, Nicole, I need your help. I said, what's going on? She says, my dad's on his deathbed. And she says, Nicole, he doesn't have a thing in the world. He's been sick for so long. They had to sell off the house, everything. He doesn't even own a car. They're living in a mobile home that a friend has donated for their use. Like he doesn't have anything. But he is so upset that he's never made a will. And she goes, so I'm not sure what the point would be. And we keep telling him that, but he's just adamant that he wants to make out a will. She says, what should we do? I said, where are you at? She gives me the address. I said, we'll be there as soon as we can. So I grab my assistant, grab a laptop and a printer and head straight down there. And I'm typing out this will all the way while my assistant's driving, and we get there and, we get to the bedside and then, okay, sir, I'm Nicole and I'm the attorney. And, what would you like your will to say? And he says, I want it all to go to my wife and my daughter. Everything I did was for them. Okay, print it out. There's his friends there that are, sitting with him. They witness it. He signs it. We get it all done. We take off, right? We're not even back at the office, which is about 20 minutes away. And the client calls and says, I can't tell you how grateful we are. He was at such peace after you left, knowing that he had done that, and he was able to let go. He was already gone before I got back to the office, and I think that experience made me realize it's not, it is about the money, right? It's about the property. It's about the taxes. It's about the creditors. It's about all of those things, but it's mostly about that last testament. That's why it's called a last testament, right? This man wanted the world to know I did it all for you, for the two of you. And that's it. And that's all he needed to do. So I know, and I try to convey that to other people. Like it might not seem important to you today, and you might laugh it off and say, "I'll be dead. I don't care what happens with my stuff." And maybe that's true too, right? But in that inevitable moment, it's going to bring you peace to know you did that.
And that peace of mind is so important. I mean, I can always say, everything I've done, I've worked hard and I've done it all for you.
Right.
But if it's in writing, it's even stronger, right?
Yeah.
Which I can see, that's the peace of mind that this gentleman was looking for to
Right.
know that it's like immortalized. And
That's
well, I know this is the third edition of your book.
right. Mhm.
So what's changed since you first published and why?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the first edition came out about 10 years ago. And I think that was at the end of 2014. That edition, that book, was really the idea I had was what if I could put my consultation in print? What if I could like kind of have this like super consultation that I could send to somebody when they schedule that consultation, right? I'll send them this little book, make it a real easy read. And so by the time they come in, we've gotten over the barriers, right? Because you can imagine as an estate planner, you got to meet someone you've never met before, sit down with them, and then you got to find out how their real feelings about their family. You got to get into their wallet. You got to find out, who's your boogeyman. Like that's a really intimate meeting. And to get to that place of comfort with somebody, it takes some time. You got to build some trust, right? And so, putting this into a book, and it worked. It really helped to establish kind of a level of trust before people came in. So that book was really designed for you to come and meet me. There were some like really personal stories about, my experiences with loved ones passing away, and like as a child, how I saw grown-ups handling the estate, and kind of all these, personal observations. And it worked really well. People came in to meet me and, can I give you a hug? I feel like I know you, you know. But it also had all this good information to help them start thinking about, what are the choices you're going to have as we go through this? Like when we think about distribution, when we think about the healthcare power of attorney and, all kinds of things. And so people felt prepared when they came in. And then about 5 years later, in Nevada, we had enough law change in the probate realm that it made sense to, let's do another edition, right? The levels of probate estates had changed, those numbers had changed. There was some changes around tax law, enough that it felt like, yeah, we can freshen this up a bit, right? And while we're at it, let's freshen up the jokes. Because from the first edition, that was really important to me. And the first edition wasn't illustrated beautifully like the third edition, but it had like memes and jokes and single panel comics and, kind of funny things that went along with the text. And so the second edition was also a chance to do some fresh new things, and add new humor to it. So another, what are we in 2025? Another 5 years or so goes by. And I wasn't even thinking about this book. My oldest, who's such a brainiac, this kid is amazing. He thought he was going to major in English, going into college, and he was about to graduate high school. And so we're talking about, his future and all these things, and then we kind of like zoom back in. I said, "Well, what are you doing this summer?" And he tells me what his plans are, and he says, "What are you doing this summer?" And I said, "I don't really know." And it comes up, why don't you rewrite that book? Oh, I guess I could, yeah, okay, yeah, maybe I should, and so I mean, I've got to give a lot of credit to my son Benjamin, who edited this edition, for making me think about that, as like, oh, maybe it is time to do that. And as we started talking about what would be different, of course, I wanted to freshen up the humor again, and maybe think about the new stories I could add to it. We also kind of spitballed this idea of like, maybe this isn't about me. Maybe it's not about coming to see me as a lawyer. What if we wrote this for anyone who's going to go see any lawyer, right? Let's make this like a more useful manual to like the general public at large. When you start thinking about maybe I should have a will or a trust, where do you even start? Right. So the book has always been subtitled A Beginner's Guide to Estate Planning. But in this third edition, it really is generally a beginner's guide to estate planning.
I love that.
Yeah.
So reading through the book, I could tell it's not focused on, hey, come see me, right? You're
Right.
you're
Right.
just giving, you're putting it out there. So to our listeners, this book is for anybody. And what I really loved about this book is that, a 50% of y'all who are out there listening, because 50% don't have a plan of any kind. Well, they all have a plan. And it's
Right.
the state that they live in, but that's not a good plan. Um, so if you're hesitant about contacting an attorney or not sure where to start, this book
Mhm.
is the best guide. And what I really loved about this is like right from the beginning, right in the first chapter, you talk about, I think it's called Clearing Hurdles. And you actually lay out, I mean, I look at it as like a checklist
Mhm.
of trying to select an estate planning attorney,
Yeah.
which I saw some things in there that were like, oh man, I hadn't even thought about that. I'm going to call my estate planning attorney and say, hey, you don't fit the bill anymore. No.
Oh
just,
no.
just, just kidding, Peter, if you're listening. But can you talk about that first thing about, like,
Yeah,
it all starts with, first of all, taking the first step to talk to an attorney, right? But how do we
right,
find one?
right. And that's, I mean, that's so intimidating for a lot of people. I always joke that if you've lived your life right, you've probably never had to call a lawyer, right?
Right.
I mean, for a lot of folks, this really is their first interaction with a private attorney. And
And
that's,
you attorneys are all scary people anyway.
oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't see it, but I've had people tell me I'm terrifying. Okay. It's just an ESQ after my name. Um, but yeah,
Uh,
that can be a hard thing. You see lawyers on TV and you see them in movies, and it's also intimidating with their expensive suits, and they're, gonna be so condescending, and then people start second guessing, like, I really don't have that much. Like, maybe it's not worth it to go through all this. They talk themselves out of it before they even pick up the phone, right? So I try to convey without saying it. Like, lawyers are people too. And there's so many lawyers. I don't care where you live. There's so many lawyers now. And we all have the same degree. We all pass the same bar. We're all licensed, right? We might have a different mix of experience and personality and priority. And so that's where the shopping comes in, right? Some lawyers will meet with you for free. They'll do a free consultation. Some lawyers charge something for a consultation. But whatever it is, it's so worth it to talk to more than one attorney, because every attorney is going to have a different fee structure. They might have different hourly rates. Some might have a flat rate. Some might charge you by the hour. You might have, an attorney here who's a solo practitioner, like that person does it all. They don't even, have a paralegal. You got another one over here who's a lawyer in a big law firm, and there's paralegals and secretaries galore, right? And I can guarantee you that your plan is going to get a different level of attention in either of those spheres, right? So it's worth it to shop around, and ask. So from the time that you start, what's the process? Are you the one that's going to be drafting my documents? Are you going to is there a paralegal that's going to work on my stuff? And those are all fair questions to understand. What are you charging? What's the work that's going to go into it? What's my responsibility as the client? How much time is this going to take from me, and what information do you need? And how soon can we expect to have this done? And then once it's done, what if I've got to update it? Are you going to, do I pay more for that? And how do you charge for that? So, I mean, all of those questions, very practical questions, are helpful so that you feel confident that you're paying the right fee. You're not overpaying, you're not getting a cheap product, you're getting the right thing. But it also gives you a chance to learn the personality, right? Because, like I said in the beginning, this becomes a very intimate conversation very quickly. And if you go down that road without having established that level of trust, then it's possible that something gets missed, right? If you don't feel comfortable with that lawyer and you kind of hold back some things to yourself because you just don't want to say it out loud in this office, right? And you figure, I'll take care of it later, or it'll buff out, it'll all work out. If you hold back like that, you're not going to get the best possible plan, right? So it's really important that the client feels like this is a good fit. This is somebody I trust that I can sit and share everything with.
Yeah, absolutely. And with technology today and the internet, I mean, you can research those people. You
Yeah,
can look at their websites, look at their backgrounds, check their LinkedIn profiles. Do they have Google reviews, and what are those? And by all means, for listeners, if you have friends or family who have done estate planning, ask for referrals. And then, like I think you said in the book, make a list of, all right, narrow it down to your top five and interview them. And the one thing that struck me was, I didn't even think about it. You had said, you prefer a male or female. It was like,
people do. Yeah. Some people really, they don't even think about it. They don't care. But some people, it matters, right? Like, I know when I'm shopping for doctors, I feel more comfortable with a female doctor. Some people feel that way about lawyers, and that's okay. Discrimination's only illegal if a corporation does it, right?
I
Don't
love
quote me
that.
out. It's not exactly true. There's a lot of asterisks there, but you get my point, right? It's okay to, kind of think about what you're comfortable with and then shop according to those parameters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's brilliant. I think it's a step-by-step guide just for anyone that's hesitant or not sure where to start. Chapter one, boom, you'll be able to narrow it down and find someone that you want to work with.
Right. Right. And that's
Um,
why it's called clearing hurdles. Because once you get over that hurdle and you're sitting in a lawyer's office with someone that you know, like, and trust, you're on the path to getting this done. You're mostly done at that point.
yeah, absolutely. And again, like you mentioned, finding out about, what about updates and things. Um, uh, an estate plan in and of itself is not a set it and forget it proposition. It's a living document, which is why I call it a living trust, right?
Mm.
for
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
a lot of reasons, but it changes and evolves as time goes on. So, I know a lot of firms have a care program or whatever where you can come in every other year and update or do those kind of things. So, very very important.
Yeah.
The other thing that struck me in your book was I think it was in chapter 5, and it talked about uh, making sure all the legal requirements are met.
Mm.
And I was looking through this, I was really thinking about those folks that do the DIY and those kind of stuff. Um, but even if it's not a DIY and it's done by an estate planning professional, um, all the steps in the process have to be done correctly. And so you had talked about I think his name was Charles Groffman.
Yeah.
And names probably changed to protect the innocent. But
Poor Chuck.
can you can you
Yeah.
can you tell that story? Because it's just like boom,
Sure.
not
Yeah.
what Chuck would have wanted, right?
Not at all. No. So it's funny. We read this case in law school in a probate, I think it was a wills and estates class. And it was, I wouldn't say it was a page turner necessarily, but I was kind of surprised at how it came out, right? So we've got this gentleman who wanted to make out a will, and he went to a lawyer and talked to him about it, and lawyer wrote up the will for him. And for whatever reason that the case doesn't explain, Charles says that he's going to take the will with him and sign it at home and bring it back to the lawyer. And so the lawyer shows him. He says, okay, so you're going to sign it here, and then you got to have two witnesses, and each witness will sign here. And he explains it to him. And Charles says, great, got it, and he goes home. A couple nights later, he and his wife have some friends over, a little dinner party. And so it's Charles, his wife, and these two couples, right? So after dinner, you almost get a sense of their house. They got a big house, right? So they leave the dining room table, they come into a living room where they're having like a dessert and tea situation. And Charles has this will laid out on a table in another room. And so he takes one of his friends and says, hey, I made out a will and I need you to witness it for me. So, it's over here. And so the friend goes back there and, Charles signs it and his friend, the witness, signs where he's supposed to sign. And then they go back to the other room and they get the third friend and say, hey, can you come? Oh, yeah, no problem. He comes back there and he witnesses as the second witness. Well, at the time, the law that governed his jurisdiction said essentially these witnesses had to witness, they had to see it, they had to watch the signing to know that that's why it's called a witness, right? And so when Charles died, his wife challenged the will because without the will, she would get more money, right? The will was structured where she didn't get as much money as she would without it because Charles was trying to make a distribution to his daughter from a prior marriage. It's all he was trying to do was make sure that his daughter from a prior marriage would inherit from him. And where he lived without the will, the wife would receive everything. And so she challenged it on the basis that she knew that these two witnesses weren't in the room. And when the witnesses were called into court, they confirmed that. And that's all it took for her to set that will aside. Now that was not a Nevada case. That wasn't even a United States case. That took place in England, and I want to say it was in the 1950s or so. But it's an example of how, when we have these rules about how wills are made, we have to pay very close attention and make sure we follow them. So not just in the words on the page, but in how they're signed, and how they're witnessed.
Yeah, and whether both witnesses have to witness at the same time.
Right.
Obviously the first witness saw him sign it, but the second one didn't.
That one didn't.
And there are certain steps. And all that being said, if the wife wasn't looking for a little bit more green, it would
Right.
never have been contested, right? But
Yeah.
these are the things that you see far too often happen, especially with DIY,
Oh,
where
yeah.
they've done stuff and there's little things, and at some point, some family member can come back and say, something's rotten in Denmark here. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh, I got a case in the door just recently. This lady, it looks very much like she downloaded a package, right? She bought a set of documents. And one set of document was like a trust with a pour over will. And a pour over will, as you know, says if there's something that's not on my trust and it's over here in my estate, I give it to my trust, right? And we have these pour over wills so that when you make the trust, it all ends up in the trust. But alongside those two documents, she also downloaded a standalone will, and she did not understand, how these documents work together, how they might not work together, and assumed that she would have to fill them both out. So the will has the same distribution as the trust, but this will is signed the same day as the pour over will. So which will is it, right? If the distribution will was signed after the pour over will, then that's the valid will because it was signed later in time. So, what a mess. So we end up, we file a petition with the court to show the court this is what happened. Everybody agrees. We would like to see this all be administered through the trust. So let's all agree that this distribution will was signed first, and the trust and the pour over will were signed second. And hopefully the court will agree with us. But, it's rough. This lady set about to do that for the specific purpose of avoiding her friend having to go to court. But now we have to go to court to sort this out so that in the administration, this friend who's the trustee and the executor doesn't get caught by somebody who wants to contest the distribution, right? This person needs to be safe from that. So here we are.
so many stories,
Yeah,
so many stories. Like I interviewed an estate planning attorney in Colorado who he had to deal with the end result wasn't a client of his, but this gentleman who had um, a lot of property and things. He had actually downloaded a trust package um, for California and put it all together and thought everything was going to be copacetic. And uh, our uh, our attorney up in Colorado had to probate that whole thing. So again, everyone has the best intentions, might be looking to save a dollar or two.
right.
And at the end of the day, you didn't save a dollar or two. In fact, you cost your family 10, 15 times the amount that it would have cost to do it right.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's
And
it's it's tough, I guess we make it look easy, right? And what lawyers do looks just so easy. We sit at a desk, we type stuff. You can download those documents that we prepare and read them yourself, right? And I think people will kind of skim over the things they don't really understand and say, well, that doesn't really matter, and then skip to the things that they do understand, who's getting what and who's in charge, and you just kind of assume it'll be okay. But there's so much more to it than that.
uh,
So much more to it than the words on the page, right? What does the law say that impacts how these words work, right? So it is complex, but that's why, in the book, I advocate that you really should have an attorney in your jurisdiction, and when you shop around, that you can find a fair price for the right experience, right? The right knowledge to help you through it. And then you've got that peace of mind. Like, not only is it done, I know it's done right. And I say this in the book too. If it's done wrong, that lawyer has malpractice insurance, right?
right.
So there's things along the way there too that even if there's a mistake, there's a way to rectify that.
You mean if I download the or go to Costco tonight and buy the will package and it's not done right, I can't sue Costco?
Good luck. Probably not.
Oh, yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
Say, I mean, and again, this book just, I mean, it's step by step. It just says, it takes you through here. You're going to first find the attorney, then we're going to make sure things are done correctly. And, you know, you, one of the keys I loved at the end of the book, um, uh, no problem. Yeah. Yeah. And once you've got it all done, before you do anything, that you've read it completely, you understand it, and you completely agree with everything it has in there.
I tell my kids that before you sign anything, those are the three rules. Just
Yeah.
read it. If you don't understand it, ask questions until you understand it, and make sure you feel like you agree with it. That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Because I know exactly what I want to happen with everything under the scenario. If something happens to Michelle, if something happens to me, what if one of the kids predeceases us and all this kind of stuff. And, you all do that and put it all laid out, but there's still the legalese that has to be in there.
Right.
And what does this mean? And you tell me in English, and I'm like, got it.
Got it. All
So,
right. I agree with that.
yeah,
Hopefully, right?
exactly.
Yeah. No, this book I have attorney friends who buy copies to give to their prospective clients. You just stick your card in it and tell people, "Hey, look, read this book. Call me when you're done and we'll be in good shape. You don't feel comfortable yet, that's okay." I hear people all the time say, "Well, I'm not ready to come in yet. I'm still doing my research." Why don't you come and talk to me? I can fast forward that research for you, like so fast. You don't have to go to law school or anything. I did it, so you don't have
It's
to.
right. That's right.
Yeah. And my
You're
referral partners too. I'll give them a stack of these books with a card and a bookmark in it, and financial advisors, CPAs, all of those real estate agents, all those people who are constantly saying, you really should get a trust. Mortgage brokers like, you really should put this house in a trust. This book is such a great introduction to the attorney that you refer people to. Just put that lawyer's card in there. And then when you're saying, do a trust, now you can hand them something funny and it's kind of eye-catching, I think. I love the art in
oh,
this.
oh,
I
I
think
love
it's
it. I was
great.
going to mention
Yeah,
your artwork in here. And on that same vein, too, our estate planning attorneys, because we have well over 1,000 estate planning attorneys listen to the show. If you've not written your own book yet, and most of you have not, um, this is a great book. Get a bunch of well, buy one, read it.
sure. Make sure you like it.
Yeah. And then and then from there, yeah, I mean, what a brilliant idea is to provide it to people, because it's a great insight that just shows that you, as the attorney, care. I'm gonna give you someone else's book,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna hope that you don't move to Nevada and have Nicole do your estate plan.
Well, I
Right?
tell you what, man, I can't steal everybody's clients. I can barely keep my arms around my own. I got a busy load here.
There you
But
go.
yeah, I mean, if you are a, kind of like-minded attorney, you're personable, you like the humor element, it's a great way to personalize yourself. And, like I said, put your card in there and, give this a read, call me when you're done, and let's get moving on this, I think
Yeah.
it's a great way to smooth that out. Um,
So let's talk about the illustrations and the humor
sure.
in the book.
Yeah.
So yeah, what I found is that the illustrations and the humor really just kind of breaking things up through the chapters. Not that the chapters are difficult to understand; they're
Sure.
very
Yeah.
easy. But I love them. So how did you come up with the idea of all these great illustrations? And
Oh my gosh. So Anthony Gray gets all the credit here. And I have to tell you, he won 3 awards for this book. He got they're all Addy Awards. He got best book cover, best overall book layout for the way it's laid out. And he got a Judge's Choice Award because it was just, the best thing that came out this year. So when I met with Anthony, he and I had not met each other, but we have this longtime friend in common. So we'd kind of been in each other's universe for a long time, but we didn't know each other. And so I told him what this book was about, and he just kind of raised an eyebrow and he says, Okay, I mean, he does the artwork for like George Thorogood and the Destroyers. He does artwork for like Bergen Festival, this rock festival, right? So he's a rock and roll, very cool illustrations. And he's just like, this sounds boring. What do you want me to do with this, right? And I asked him, I said, when you were a kid, did you ever read that book, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark? And he lights up and he says, That's the book that made me want to start drawing. And I was like, Great. I said, I don't want anything ghoulish, or scary, because the topic itself is already scary. But I want to lean into that a little bit, and in the way that those illustrations and scary stories were so like they would just draw you in. Like you're kind of afraid to look at it, but the more you look, the more you can see. I said, That's what I imagine for this book. He says, Great. So he set about with some sketches and, we, had a few meetings, with his different, sketches to kind of get the right tone. But he, from the start, like he nailed it on the colors. I love just the look of it. It's a little bit, it's not quite comic book, but it's illustrated, these illustrated images. And I don't know if you've noticed, but like some of these, like chapter 6, there's an illustration of this lighthouse on a cliff. And if you look
Yeah.
deep into that cliff, you can find the key. It's in there. So it's one of those things that if you keep looking at the illustration, you might notice other items or patterns or even jokes within the illustration itself. Um,
Oh, yeah, I
so it's
didn't pick up on that. That's really cool.
yeah, so he would read a chapter and then create an illustration for that chapter, right? And at first he I think he just wasn't he didn't believe me when I said I just do it. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're an artist, and so each chapter he would just draw what came to his mind. And for me it was just it was a thrill to see how these words come to life in an artist's head. It was mind-blowing to see what he came out with. So now I tell people you got to buy the book just for the pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, the book is a piece of art
it
as
is. It
well as
really is.
a useful
Yeah,
guide. One of
yeah.
the stories that I'll share, I love this one in here. One of the on the buffer pages says 3 buddies died in a car accident and went to heaven. They were asked, when you were in your casket and friends and family were mourning over you, what would you have liked them to say about you? Well, the first guy says, I would have liked to hear them say, I was a great doctor of the time, and a great family man. The second guy said, I would like to hear them say, I was a wonderful husband and school teacher who made a huge difference in many children's lives. The last guy said, I would like to hear them say, look, he's moving.
That's a good one out of the book. There's a lot of good ones in there, but that's one of my favorites.
They're great.
Yeah.
Just a little teaser. I mean, just the jokes are worth the price of admission.
Right, right. There you
Yeah,
go.
exactly. So, and these are some great examples. Hopefully, it hits close for some of our listeners, more eye opening. But in your book, yeah, like I say, you really break things down in a very approachable way. What do you hope readers take away from this? What's your message to someone who just keeps putting off the planning?
I hope that person gets through this and realizes like this is so doable. This is so doable. That's what I hope your takeaway is. That you feel like you're not intimidated about talking to a lawyer or shopping for one if you don't have one yet. But if you got this with a lawyer's card in it, that by the time you're done, I'm gonna call right now. I'm gonna leave a message if they're closed and I'm gonna get an appointment because this is so doable, right? So everything from how do you think about who should be the trustee? Like I talk about how some people think, oh, we'll just put the kids in birth order, right? Well, if you know anything about birth order, that might not be the best idea.
No.
Not everybody's kids are all suited to that kind of work too. You think about, what's different about my consideration for who's my healthcare agent, right? It's possible that the person I want handling my money isn't the person who's advocating for me at the hospital, right? But to face all of those things and just break it down with a little bit, enough jokes to make you giggle, right? That by the time you're done, you're like, you know what? You realize I have been walking around with my estate plan in my head for years. In my head, I know who these people are. I know what I want to see happen, and there's no reason why I should wait another minute. I'm just going to go do it, you know. That's my
Yeah,
hope. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Because what's in your head isn't going to hold up anywhere
right.
when you're not here.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh, I've sat with so many families who say, "Oh, but he told us over and over. He said all the time he wanted Jimmy to have the Camaro." We all heard it 100 times. I'm sorry,
yeah, yeah,
right? Like it's not going to work out that way. Yeah.
yeah. So get the estate plan out of your head, get it on paper, and then you can rest easy.
Yeah.
Hopefully, not rest easy in that sense for a long time,
You
but
can. You can rest easy in lowercase letters and rest easy in capital letters.
there we go. Oh God, this is great. Well, we're running up on our time here, and I'm so appreciative of you joining me today. And I have so many more questions I want to ask, so we'll probably have to do a second episode down the road here. But
I'd
I think
love that.
you, yeah, it'd be awesome. And I think you've really shown us that estate plan doesn't have to be scary. I mean, you've got a great sense of humor. It can be empowering and yeah, a little bit fun. So
Yeah. Yeah.
for anyone listening, I can't recommend this book highly enough. I hope you die laughing. It's available on Amazon and on her website. I think it'd make a perfect gift for anyone who needs a nudge to get their affairs in order with a smile.
Mhm.
So Nicole, where can people find you or learn more about you and your work?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm here in Sparks, Nevada, but it's probably easier to find me at nevadacounsel.com. That's NEVADACOUNSEL.com. I also have I hope you die laughing.com is set up for the book. And both of those entities are on Facebook and Instagram. Nevada Council's on LinkedIn and Nextdoor. And our number is 775-832-3012.
Awesome. Awesome. And for our listeners today, thank you so much for joining us. And to make it really easy, I've included all those links and numbers below in the show notes. So remember, estate planning isn't about death. It's about making life easier for the people you love. So until next time, remember your life is your legacy. So plan wisely, live fully, and try to die laughing. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you so much.